Well, it's Wednesday, and this is Wednesday's Daily Bread. I'm David, glad that you're tuned in with us. We probably all remember a part of Old Testament history when the people of Israel are finishing or have finished their time of 40 years in the wilderness. They're going to cross the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Joshua has taken the leadership of the nation because Moses has died. They send out spies. Joshua sends out 2 spies to Jericho, and Rahab, remember that, very important story, takes those spies in, and they bring their report back to Joshua. So they cross Jordan into this land that God is going to give them. And they camp at Gilgal, and at Gilgal a couple of important things happen in that. The practice of circumcision is enforced here. Apparently that had been neglected for some time. And another thing that apparently had been neglected was the observing of the Passover. So they observe the Passover while they are there. And their eyes are set on Jericho. And as Joshua one morning is apparently surveying that city from a distance, someone appears to him. And that one that appears to him is the captain of the Lord's host, the angel of the Lord. And Joshua asks him a very interesting question, given all the things we know God has said to Joshua and what he's led him to do. He simply asks him, are you on our side or are you on their side? And the response of the angel of the Lord is, no. But I am the commander of the army of the Lord, and now I have come. He didn't take sides. That's not the point, Joshua. The point is, I am the leader of God's army, and therefore we accomplish the will of God. That's all I'm concerned about, is accomplishing the will of God. There is such an important lesson to be learned there. Anytime that we are faced with an issue or a question and we're trying to figure out what side of that we are on, and then when you add to that mix the fact that we're people of faith, then the question is often asked, well, on this particular matter, whose side is God on? Well, I tell you, that's the wrong question to ask. Abraham Lincoln was once posed a question about whose side God was on in regard to the great conflict of the Civil War, because there were people of faith on both sides of that, and some very religious people, and so that was a common question and very hotly debated. And Lincoln's response, "Sir, my concern is not for whether God is on our side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side, for God is always right." You see, that's the question to ask, not whose side is God on, but am I on God's side? That's the only valid question. You might remember another occasion. This happened with Joshua's predecessor, though Joshua was present, Moses, at Mount Sinai in the aftermath of the debacle of the golden calf there. And when God told Moses about that, and Moses was upset, God was upset about that, and Moses went down and stood before the people. And he, in Exodus 32 and 26, asked this question, "Who is on the Lord's side? Come to me." That's the question we have to always ask. Am I on the Lord's side? That's the greatest question. You see, when we ask the question, is God on my side, we are casting God, whether we recognize it and think about it or not, we're casting God in a supporting role to us. And that's not the place that God occupies. God is not in a supporting role. God is the role. He is God. And the only question is whether or not we are on His side or not. Jeremiah suggested that we may have some pretty admirable traits about us. We may be very intelligent, we may be very strong, we may be very wealthy, we may be a lot of things, but no matter what we are, none of that is worth boasting in. If anyone boasts, let him boast in this, the prophet writes. Jeremiah chapter 9 and verse 24, that I am the Lord who practices steadfast love, justice, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, declares the Lord. If you're going to boast in anything, boast that you know me. We know God, and we determine that our life is going to be brought into alliance with Him and who He is. It's not whose side is God on. The question is, am I on God's side?